part 2 of my New Right video series playlist thing, where I'm explaining conservative right-wing values as a whole under an umbrella. Okay, so I want to talk about rights and economics today. I realized yesterday that I didn't even talk about republicanism or what a republic is. I did add that in the description of the video, but I think that'd be a great place to get started, is just talking about what a republic even is. So, when you had the old school democracies where it was literally just people voting on everything, what that turned into was, two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner. It's the 51% oppressing the 49%, and there was no safeguard in place to say, look, you cannot have a society of 60% men voting for 40% of the women to walk around topless every day. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't have the majority of poor people voting for the 30% of rich people, 20% of rich people, or of the civilization that is rich, to give up all their money to the poor. You just can't have people violating each other's rights. So the concept of rights and a republic really go hand in hand, because the whole point of a republic is to allow people the right to vote and decide on things without the power to, step over certain boundaries. And those boundaries are rights. And that's what a republic is. A republic is a limited government that's limited by certain documents like a constitution with amendments that says, the government can do this, that, and the other, but you cannot violate free speech. You cannot take guns away. You cannot censor the press, things like that. So a constitution, in theory, and there's a lot of argument on the right about this, does it actually protect people's rights? Nah, kinda. I mean, it's not the best. It has flaws, but I mean, it's better than some places. And some places really do have, no rights, but they still have a constitution. Like, I can't just name countries off the top of my head, but I think North Korea, it has... Oh, hey, there's someone watching. Cool. What's up, man? Or woman. So, yeah, there's certain places that are extremely tyrannical that have constitutions, and it's kind of like, a constitution by itself is not going to protect everyone's rights. You kind of have to have a culture that values rights. So what is a right? If you hear the word right, talking about moral rights or whatever, before you've decided to become a conservative or to open up your mind to right-wing ideas, you probably think of rights as what we call positive rights, which is things that you're owed, okay? If you are owed something, then that actually means that someone else is obligated to give it to you. That sounds simple, but that's really what it boils down to. So you cannot have a right to the labor of others in something like healthcare or welfare or whatever, without also saying, I have the right to take from that other person. That is a positive right. Now, positive rights by themselves are not 100% wrong. You can make the argument that sometimes they're valid, but they cannot ever supersede or take over the importance of a negative right. Negative rights are what civilizations are really built upon. A negative right is the right from. So positive right is the right to something. Negative right is the right from something. A negative right is something like you have the right from violence, the right from being robbed or stolen from, or, anyone initiating violence against you, you have the right from that. So no one has the right to steal from you, to damage your property, to lie about you, to damage your reputation, they don't have the right to defraud you. And I'd say even lying about you, that's even like kind of questionable, but not, you know, these days, not really. They don't have the right to lie to you about something that will get you to make a decision that can hurt yourself, you know, so like fraud. Oh yeah, buy this bridge. It's made out of solid gold, and you know, it's not, you know. So obviously murder, assault, things that violate your, like I said yesterday, non-aggression principle, self-ownership. You don't have the right to do that to people. And a better society will be one that's built on protecting people's negative rights. It's really as simple as kindergarten morality, you know? Don't hit people, don't take their stuff. It's pretty simple like that. This is kind of a universal understanding amongst people on the right. I think libertarians are the ones that really put it into words the most eloquently, but everyone on the right kind of understands that. If you go further right, you're going to get something more like the right to free association, which is actually completely sound logically. It is completely rational, completely justified. It only says that you have the right to organize with people that you want to, or associate with people you want to. So for example, if you have a business, regardless of what you think about it from like a icky standpoint, morally speaking, if I were to start a business and put a sign outside that said no communists allowed, no black people allowed, no left-handed people allowed, whatever, morally speaking, that is justified to do. You're okay with doing that because you have the right to freedom of association. And we see this all the time in real life in the modern day. You know, there are bars and coffee shops in like Oregon where police are not allowed. That's freedom of association. They're communist bars, but morally speaking, they're not like that's a libertarian thing to do. Women on Tinder are only dating men that are 6 foot and above. Kind of sucks if you're, you know, the 86% of us that are not 6 feet and over. But morally speaking, that's freedom of association. Why do we only limit certain people from the right to free association? So that doesn't require other people to do anything. You know what I mean? That's a negative right. That only requires other people to respect your rights. And right now, as far as respecting your rights or everyone else's rights, I'm already doing it. I'm not beating anyone up. I'm not stealing anything from anyone else. So when it comes to, and I'm about to talk about economics, when it comes to dealing with rights, it's much better to have a society based around, here's a few small things you're not allowed to do, everything else is cool, rather than, okay, everyone is owed this, that, and the other, you have to give this and that to everyone, you have to do all these things, because these are obligations that force you to go out of your way, and logically speaking, they're inconsistent to do all of these things. You cannot owe multiple things at once, because if positive rights are true, then I'm not allowed technically to keep anything of my own because I'm supposed to give it away to someone else, you know. But then how do I decide who I'm supposed to give it away to? Because everyone needs it. So you cannot have a society based on need, and you cannot have an economic system based on need neither. So let's talk about economics now. So we talked about rights, about the difference between positive rights and negative rights. You cannot have an economic system based around owing people this, that, and the other. And instead, you need to have an economic system based around property rights. Now, quick little backstory talking about economics. Economics is one of those things like fighting, right? You know how they say every man thinks that he can, and not just men, there's lots of women that think this too. They think they can, you know, beat anyone in a fight. They think they grossly overestimate their fighting ability. Economics is one of those, and of course, if you get in a real fight, you realize just how mistaken you are, because fighting there's a lot to it. It's a lot more messy than you think, and economics is no different. Economics is a dismal science, as they say. Hundreds and thousands of years ago, not that long, like before World War I, before the Great Depression, there are these two main economists. Just for the sake of argument, it really boiled down to these two different economists You had Ludwig von Mises, and you had the American dude's name. Anyways, Ludwig von Mises was the Austrian, and then there was the American dude. I forgot his name. It doesn't matter. He was like the head of the Federal Reserve or some shit. And this guy wanted to just print money. And Ludwig von Mises said, you know what? If you print too much money and we go off the gold standard, it's going to cause a collapse, an economic collapse. And the American dude was like, you know what? In the end, we're all dead. It doesn't matter. And the economy went to shit. We had the Great Depression after that. So in economics, it's a dismal science. There's a lot to it, but it's still simpler, a lot simpler than what we're taught in school. When you learned economics in school teaches economics completely wrong. They teach economics based on numbers and weird math and trying to like use statistics to predict things, and it never works. It's kind of like the Ptolemaic view of the universe before they understood that the sun was at the center of the universe. They had all these like concentric circles that went like this, and they were trying to explain it like, what the hell is retrograde? They had these big complicated versions of the universe that didn't make any sense. You couldn't predict anything. But one guy was like, you know what, let's put the sun right in the center of our solar system. And then everything, I can snap better with this hand. Everything clicked into place. Economics is like that too. So here's a funny little twist. People on the left think that, reality is subjective, but economics is objective. But in truth, it's the opposite. Reality is objective, but economics is subjective. What that means is that value is just an opinion. That's it. If I value something more than you value it, I'm probably going to be willing to spend more money on it. That's it. Right-wing economics is not like left-wing economics, where we have three massive volumes of word salad trying to explain something that they clearly don't understand. And, talking about like Socrates, I'll talk about him all the time. He was the wisest man in Athens because he was willing to say, I don't know. When it comes to economics, there's some things just, you cannot have the answers to everything because there's some genius out there that's going to figure out how to solve a problem that none of us even knew was a problem. And then all of a sudden our lives get easier. Look at AI. People weren't thinking about how badly we needed AI, but now that it exists, it makes a lot of things kind of simpler. Same with the internet, same with vehicles. If you ask people before the invention of cars what they wanted, they would have said, I want a faster horse. So with economics, there's a lot of things that we don't know. So if you're trying to predict exactly how everything's going to work out in some sort of utopian economy, you're wasting your time. It's not possible. Instead, you need to understand certain basic principles of economics. So the first one is value is subjective, okay? Now, the second one is that there are unseen costs to everything. I'm going to explain something to you real quick called a broken window fallacy. So the broken window fallacy is this. Imagine you own a bakery and some hooligans throw a rock through your window of your bakery. Now, the left-wing economists and even dumb right-wing economists, mainstream American economists, will look at that and say, well, you know what? That baker now has to buy a new window, and that's going to stimulate the economy. But what you're missing, the unseen cost of that, is that that's money that he could have saved to buy a new vending machine or to give his employees a raise or a bonus or something that would have stimulated the economy in other ways. So you look at something in one way, like let's say free healthcare, right? You look at free healthcare and say, well, that's a net benefit on the economy. But what do we have in countries with free healthcare? Really, really high taxes. The currency is losing value. The product itself sucks because you're stopping competition in that field. If I don't have to pay for a doctor on this side of town because that's the free healthcare side of town, why the fuck am I going to drive across town to this other doctor that might be a little better, but he charges me money? I'm going to go with a free doctor 9 times out of 10. Or at least most people will. You know, and you look at Africa, right? Africa is a massive continent, tons of poverty. They've been given over $1 trillion in foreign aid over the years. And amongst that foreign aid was a bunch of free food, free this and that. So like imagine you're a farmer in Africa and you're trying to, you know, make money. I have to sell carrots for $1 each. And just saying, pulling numbers out of my ass. I can't compete with the US aid truck over there that's handing out bundles of carrots for free. I can't do it. So there are unseen costs of everything in an economy that people on the left and some people on the right too overlook because they care more about what the outcome of the thing is. They're judging it based on the desired outcome rather than the real world outcome. Like left-wing politicians will always be like, oh, we need a war on poverty or something. We need to solve poverty. And their war on poverty will actually increase poverty. You look at the statistics and you look at the areas that are affected by these policies and they get worse. They make poverty worse. And what happens is they pat themselves on the back. They don't learn from their mistakes. They don't say, oh, you know what? Maybe that didn't work. What they do instead is they judge based on the desired outcome. They say, well, you know what? We wanted to end poverty. Isn't that enough? Isn't that good? So to be an economist or to even talk about economics, you need to be a realist. You know, you cannot just live your life based on wishes. It's kind of like, I talked yesterday about like maternal and paternal instincts. The maternal instinct, which is necessary, is I am the table, I deserve this. Positive rights. It's kind of wishful thinking, but it's like I need this. Paternal instinct is, you know, it's protective, but it's also like realistic. It's like, look, man, you got to straighten up. You got to do this. If you want this, you got to do this. So you cannot get something for free and expect that to work out. You can think of economics also like this, especially with a state, with a government. Imagine we're all pulling a cart. You know, you, me, everyone watching this, that will ever watch this, we're all pulling a cart. And some people can get on the cart, and if they get on the cart, the rest of us will pull them. Well, if no one's on the cart, it's not that heavy. But as soon as anyone jumps on the cart, it becomes heavier. It gets harder to pull. And as it gets harder to pull, we're all working harder, and we're each getting more tired. So more of us want to get on the cart. Eventually, it stops moving because no one can pull it. So, oh God, someone said Kirk was fuck you, man. Fucking say that to my face, man. Let me hear any of you cunts say that to my face. So look, economics, you cannot create something out of nothing. It has to come from somewhere. You have to trade value. How do these people even find my fucking channel? Okay. So, broken window fallacy. There's also the tragedy of the commons. Okay, so if you have something public, which is kind of what I'm getting into about this, you know, cart thing. If you have a government and you have a welfare system where multiple people are putting in to this welfare system, you cannot have more people taking out from something than they're putting into something, which is the temptation in a lot of communities. And that's kind of what happens, where certain communities become a net gain and some are a net loss. So a net gain would be where more people are paying into the system than they're taking out of it. Now, depending on what you want government to be able to afford to do, you need to have more and more people paying taxes and being productive members of society than people taking out of it. If you have everyone taking free stuff out from the state and they're taking out more value than they're putting into it, that's a non-sustainable system. Mathematically, it's like I'm putting, ones in the bucket and someone else is taking out negative or putting in negative threes. Eventually the bucket's going to go negative. You have to have more people putting in than taking out. That's the way a government works. Governments kind of work like old school insurance or mutual aid, how it used to work, where everyone puts into a bucket and it's expected that you put more into it than you take out. So for whatever reason, you try and prevent people from taking more out than they need to by, preventing health problems from arising, preventing, hardships from coming up. And so that's how you have the glue of society is people looking out for each other and preventing bad things from happening. You kind of want everyone to be, adding to the pot. But the more people taking out, then, eventually it's going to go empty and run out of other people's money. That's like the saying, socialism works until you run out of other people's money. The government is it's like a tick on a dog's body. It cannot live without the dog. The government relies on yes, I am an American. Brother too, I don't know what that is. Hi, Inez. What's up? Yes, I am an American. I'm a proud American. There's a lot of great things about America. I hope you watched my first video where I kind of introduced, well, not my first video, but the one I made yesterday, which was talking about American values, what conservatives and people of the right wing generally believe, and what unites us and what separates us. Today I'm talking about economics and rights. Not, all of morality in a nutshell, but rights as a whole are basically pretty simple. Like I said earlier, it's basically you're just protected from certain behavior, and one is protected behavior from other people that violates their personal rights, then it creates a high functioning society. And then when it comes to economics, you can kind of extrapolate from rights the type of economy that you need, which is one where you are not obligated to pay for everyone else's this, that, and the other. People are not owed free stuff from the whole, which is you and me paying taxes. I am not morally obligated to pay for your free stuff. And you are not morally obligated to pay for my free stuff. That's morality in a nutshell. It sounds harsh, but that's what's necessary to create a free society that is sustainable. If you have too many people riding on the wagon and not enough people pulling the wagon, then eventually the wagon is going to collapse. If you have more people taking out from the bucket than putting into the bucket, eventually the bucket is going to go empty. And when you run out of other people's money, what do? How does socialism work when socialism is reliant upon redistributing other people's money? When socialists do not work, they call themselves workers, but they always talk about post-scarcity and not having to work. And realistically, everyone who calls themselves a socialist, none of them want to start a business. None of them like working. That's just not who they are. So let's real quick. I don't want this video to be super long because I have other things to do, and these subjects are a little more simple than the ones yesterday. Let's talk about capitalism, socialism, communism. Okay, the three economic models. Socialism is workers own the means of production, technically. So a co-op is a socialist business structure. Co-ops are legal. So why are socialists bitching and moaning about things? Well, the reality is that socialists are lying about what they want. Because if they were honest, they would just go work in co-ops. They would just be like, the Jehovah's Witnesses of co-op business structures, where they just say, hey, let's all go start a business together. They don't do that. I don't know why. If I was a socialist and I took it seriously, I would just fight to start my own, shared business with other people. I'd just start co-ops, or I'd go only shopping at co-ops, but they don't. Communism is not just the workers own the means of production, but all of society owns the means of production. Both of these, socialism, the aim of socialism is communism. Socialists are little cheerleaders for communism. They're trying to work to spread communism and make it mainstream and popular. Communists don't believe that it's true communism until the entire planet is communist. It's an international belief system where they want to get rid of money and the government, but they do it through making the government bigger. All communists make the government bigger. They say they don't. They pretend that they hate the government, and maybe some of them do, but they still fight for policies that make the government bigger. Both of these, socialism and communism, violate private property rights, which is my right to start a business, your right to start a business, our rights to own that business and to keep the proceeds, the profits from that business. And they're unsustainable in the long run because of certain economic factors. Like, for one, is the price factor. Okay, so if so this really happened in Soviet Russia. They had quotas for everything. They said this factory needs to produce X amount of tons of nails and this many X amount of dresses or something. And so they would just produce big nails because they were easier and faster to produce, and they would just produce smaller dresses to fit the quota. Or, so what wound up happening was that people's actual needs were not met because people were getting the wrong size nails, people were getting the wrong size dresses, they were getting one product that they didn't need because the quota did not match the demand, and then they were getting too much of things they did not need because that was what the quota was for. So why do we even have prices? Why isn't everything just free? Well, the short answer is because, here's a little fun story. When I was in college, I went to a couple semesters of college. I had an astronomy teacher who said, he was some Hindu guy. He was like, I don't understand. Like, I understand so much of how the universe works and how stars work and all that, but no one understands prices. Why does an apple cost what an apple costs? We'll never know. And the rest of the class was like, yes, that's true. No one knows why apples cost how much they do. And I was like, I actually looked around at everyone. I was like, are you all fucking retarded? And I said that. I said those exact words. I said, are y'all fucking stupid? And I actually stood up and I gave them a quick little economics lesson. I asked, okay, hey, raise your hand if you'd be willing to spend $1 million on an apple. No one raised their hand. Then I said, okay, raise your hand if you'd be willing to spend a penny on an apple. Everyone raised their hand. And so I said, okay, y'all know what an auction is? Imagine I keep raising that price because I want to get as much out of selling an apple as I can. If I can sell an apple for $1 million, I'll do it. But no one's going to buy it. So I want to make it as expensive as I can while people still pay for it. If no one pays for it, then I have to lower the price. So prices, they match the demand of a product. If people, and a demand is need. This is ironically the only way to measure needs is through prices. Communists base their whole economic system on need, which is from the ability to the need. Sounds nice, completely retarded bullshit, doesn't work. Because you cannot measure a need without prices. And interesting fact, communists don't have money. They don't use money. They don't believe in money. So in a society that does not have money, you cannot meet people's needs. So, prices. If I want the most for my apples, because I worked hard on growing them apples, man. I planted them trees and I fucked off. That takes a lot of work. I'm joking. It does actually have a lot of work, but I'm probably going to come around whatever the price of an apple is, because that's what people are willing to pay. But I also need to get something out of it, because my labor is not free. If I wind up working for free, guess what? I'm not working after that, because what do I get out of it? Why am I going to bust my ass to give someone else something if I'm not getting anything in return? You ever heard of the game theory or something, where something is like, is it a positive sum game? Is it a negative sum game, or a zero sum game? Economics is a positive sum game. That's why we have progress, where buildings exist that didn't exist. Communists and socialist people on the left, they believe there's a fixed pie, and everyone takes off a slice of pie. I call that the fixed pie fallacy. I thought I came up with that term. I've heard other people use that term, but it's basically, you can disprove it by simply looking around. If anything exists that was not there 100 years ago, then that disproves the fixed pie fallacy. If we only lived in forests and there was no technology whatsoever, then the fixed pie fallacy would work. But as soon as human beings started building tools, that debunked the fixed pie fallacy. Because everything that exists now did not exist before. But everything that exists is a product of positive sum game. I am sitting in a parking lot right now. I'm sitting in a car. My car is a Honda. Good job, Honda. It was built by people that said, you know what? I want to order all these parts, all these materials, all these tons of metal, all these tons of plastic, whatever, fabrics, so I can build a car. So the Honda factory in Japan valued all these parts and materials that they used to build the car more than the people that sold the materials valued them. So the people that gave all the metal to the Honda factory and the rubber for the tires and all that shit, they valued the money that the Honda factory gave them more than they valued the materials they were getting rid of, and vice versa. Because again, value is subjective. So Honda values the materials more, and I don't know, the metal mining company, I don't know, metal companies, valued the money that Honda could give them more than the metals. And so they traded. So each one benefited. That's the essential building blocks of capitalism. Capitalism, I'll go by the filthy fucking communist definition of capitalism, because it's not a terrible definition of capitalism. Private ownership over the means of production. I'll go further and say it's private property rights and free trade. So private property rights and free trade means that I have the right to my own yard, my own house. If I bought it, traded it, earned it, was given it, and inherited it, whatever, by a fair method, then it's my property. I can do whatever the hell I want on it without hurting other people. I can start a business someplace, because if I start a business online, I can start a business in my garage. I can buy or build a building someplace, a warehouse, a storefront, and I can set up a business there. And it's all justified because that's my property. I'm allowed to trade whatever products I want with people that are willing customers. I'm not allowed to force anything on people using force or violating their rights, but it's free trade, and that's capitalism. Now, taxation is, here's a fun, talking about economics and rights and shit. Taxation is theft. Okay. Most people on the right kind of understand this. And so they value choosing what the government spends our money on wisely. Libertarians don't believe in taxation at all, for the most part, or they believe in taxation just for basic things like police, courts, borders, no like foreign wars. You'll be hard pressed to find a libertarian that supports foreign wars. Conservatives are a little more socialist than us, libertarians. They support some foreign wars if it can seem justified, like if you're saving another country from something bad, or protecting the borders.
Here's an
things
answer
like
from Wikipedia.
shut up. Watch. I didn't ask you. Sorry, my watch interrupted me. So you see how economics, there's more to it, but we kind of all believe taxation is either a general bad thing or it's something that should be taken very seriously. People, conservatives, Republicans, all want taxation to be lower, and we also generally want government spending to be lower. Sometimes, especially older conservatives, like we always make fun of the boomers because they want a bigger state, but they want smaller taxes, which is a contradiction. You cannot have both. It's one or the other. If you want a drug war, that costs millions and billions of dollars in taxation because you have to pay all the cops that are going to go enforce these things. You're taking people out of the workforce, so you're losing money in taxes that way, so you're going to have to tax everyone else more. You're going to have to buy equipment, drug dogs. You're going to have to house more people in prison. And of course, it violates people's rights to privacy because you can just say, oh, I smelled something or whatever, probable cause or something. And then, you violate their rights. And then that's a net loss on the taxpayer for the most part. There's arguments to say, like, did fentanyl Floyd need to get taken off the streets? Yes, 100%. A lot of those people, a lot of, drug dealers and whatnot, they are negative aspects of society, but there's also a lot of positive people in society, like some pot smokers or whatever that, they're high functioning drug users. I'm going to get into drugs in a different video, but economics, the main things are the tragedy of the commons. I kind of explained, the broken window fallacy. Let me talk a little bit more about the tragedy of the commons. When you have, like, the reason it's called the tragedy of the commons is, imagine we're all sheep farmers and we're all neighbors, and there's a big field we all let our sheep into one day or every day. We let them out there to graze, and then we bring them back in. Well, none of us have any incentive to use less field. We all want our sheep to eat as much grass as possible because we want them to get big and fat. So that field is going to go to shit pretty soon. This is something we see in the ocean with, because you cannot own patches of ocean. And so people kind of just dump shit in the ocean. They don't take care of it. And they fish everywhere. So the ocean life population has decreased by like 90% in the past 100 years because there's no private property on the ocean. It's a commons. When instead of having one big shared field, all the sheep farmers are responsible for their own small plots of land, they're much better at utilizing it wisely so they don't use up everything. You have to be conscious of your resource use so you don't overuse anything and run out of it. And when something is public, when something is a commons or it's shared like that, then it gets used up quickly. So when it comes to taxation, I keep repeating myself because I forget what I've said. I'm going to make, eventually I'm going to try and make this like a better organized video series. I kind of just wanted this to introduce new people to it because I have a busy schedule. I'm on my way to work, grab my morning caffeine, and I wanted to just talk a little bit. It's don't presume that you know how economics works if you haven't read any Mises if you haven't read. A good book to recommend would be Henry Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson. If you're new to economics or you're new to the right and you want to kind of understand our take on economics, read that book, Henry Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson. Now, before I go, I need to talk about cryptocurrency. Oh my God. So we lose money not just through taxation, them stealing money directly from us, but you also have to consider that inflation steals our money as well. It's a type of indirect taxation. Now, what inflation is the government prints money, and by increasing the supply of money, now here's supply and demand. You have a huge supply of something, the demand of it goes down, the value of that thing goes down because value is subjective. If no one wants something because there's so much of it, then its value goes down. But if there's not a lot of it, it's something rare, its value goes up. This is why gold is valuable. One reason why gold is valuable, because I think they said of all the gold in the world, it could only fill up like 2 or 3 Olympic swimming pools, like Olympic-sized swimming pools. So gold is actually kind of rare. It's and that's what makes it valuable. Well, Bitcoin, there is only 21 million Bitcoin. I always get it confused, 21 or 23 million. I think it's 21 million. There's only 21 million Bitcoin ever in the world. So that, because it cannot be printed, you can't just print more Bitcoin. That means that it will not lose value through inflation. It is inflation proof. Say what you want about it for anything else, but it's a tool that has been designed to be inflation proof and to be traded between two people. You own all your own Bitcoin. It's a decentralized personal private banking system where you own it yourself, you have it in your pocket, and you trade it with other people. Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, it's not a stock. It can be. You can make, fiat currency is what we call government printed money. You can buy cryptocurrency or mine cryptocurrency. It will gain value over time, and then you sell it for dollars, fiat currency, and you're really just trading one currency for another. You are buying valuable currency with less valuable currency. You're letting the valuable currency raise in value, and then you're selling that for the less value currency. You're trading your high value currency Bitcoin for your low value currency, the dollar. And that, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because we do need dollars to work in the real world. But what libertarians and what people who have been into Bitcoin have been wanting for not decades, about a decade, because Bitcoin came out in 2009, so a little over a decade. And I've been a big advocate of Bitcoin for years, but because I was not taught economics or financing growing up. I was taught, money is the root of all evil, blah, blah, blah. This is a big problem with a lot of conservatives, by the way, because a lot of conservative Christians have bullshit ideas about economics. They think that work ethic is good. You should be a hard worker, but they'll also on the same side say, oh, greed is bad. You shouldn't be selfish. Rich people can't get into heaven, or they have as hard of a trouble getting into heaven as a rich man, or as a camel fitting through the eye of the needle, or whatever bullshit stuff you heard in church. You need to be selfish. There's nothing wrong with being selfish. As long as you're not going out and hurting other people, you're not obligated to lay down your life for a stranger and by means of giving him your money. It will not benefit you. If you want to save other people, just like on an airplane, you put the oxygen mask on your own face before you put it on someone else, because if you're passed out, you can't help other people, If protecting yourself was wrong, firemen would not wear protective gear. They would just run in without anything. Oh, well, that's stupid, because then they'd burn. Yeah, no shit. Of course they would. If we're out here glorifying poverty, while at the same time bitching about how we're supposed to feed the poor. Why? Why should we feed the poor? Aren't they better off being impoverished? If we're going to glorify poverty and demonize wealth, demonize selfishness. And isn't it selfish for a homeless person to walk into a shelter looking for free food? At what point of the Pavlovs, Asimovs, whoever, the hierarchy of needs, at what point in someone searching out for their own hierarchy of needs, to be honest, even if some of these commenters are trolls, I'm just happy I have commenters. Look at that. This is my first ever live stream. At what point in this hierarchy of needs do we start shaming people for looking out for themselves? Is it not food, shelter, water? If not food, shelter, water, the thing that comes next. What about the thing that comes next? What about the thing that comes next? If someone goes to the gym, that's being selfish. That's them looking out for themselves. Are we going to blame them for that? Are we going to praise them for that? You have every right to look out for yourself and to pursue your own values in life. Cryptocurrency is not just, it's not a stock. It can make you money, but what it's ultimately good for is trading with each other outside of taxation and outside of inflation, because we don't trust the government to take care of everything. That's why we have amendments to the Constitution. That's why we have a republic, because we don't want the government in charge of everything. We don't trust them. You know, we have to keep them in check, and we have to be responsible for ourselves. Personal responsibility, freedom of choice, value is subjective, tragedy of the commons, the broken window fallacy. I guess these are the 5 main values that I wanted to share with you guys this morning before I started my day. I hope you really enjoyed my live stream. This is my first ever live stream. I don't know if I'm going to keep up a live stream method of, communicating, but it'll probably upload faster, so maybe I will. And if this takes off, then I'll make more higher effort videos. All right. Thanks, everybody. Hope your day is excellent. I'll see you later. Bye.